This is a mom to an infant with a cloaca and a rectal bladder fistula. In cases of imperforate anus, with the probability of bowel control is low or unknown, what are the factors used to determine whether it is better to do a reconstructive repair or just stick with an ostomy?
The detailed question.
It's a pretty heavy question. So I think the way I approach these patients is, I know patients with like a rectal bladder neck fistula have about 20% chance of continence. And we didn't talk about this, but there's no textbook answers on how we could predict continence, but we do look at 3 different issues with each patient to try to guide the families in what the outcomes would be. One is the malformation itself. So if the malformation is a lower malformation, better control, we know that, and the higher malformations have less control. The second thing we look at is something called the sacral ratio. So when getting X-ray images of the patient, we can get special X-rays of the sacrum or the tailbone, and the development of the tailbone indirectly tells us how the development of the nerves in that area occurred during development. And so if you had a good development of your sacrum or the bone, we extrapolate that to mean we had good development of the nerves. And so there are calculations we could do to determine if you had good development or not as good development of the tailbone, which helps guide us into the rates of continence. The third thing we look at is if a patient has tethered cord. And so if a patient has tethered cord, and that's usually determined by an ultrasound early in life, that's usually in the first 3 to 6 months of life, you can get an ultrasound, or later in life, you'll need to get an MRI. If you have a tethered cord, the chances of continence or control of your bowel movements is lower. And so combining those 3 variables together, we could help guide a family into determining whether they will have bowel control or not. Also, what we can do later in life in patients, especially patients that have something called exstrophy or cloacal exstrophy, is seeing if we could solidify their stool from their stoma output. The more solid the stool is in the stoma, the likely we could help patients get control from the bottom. If the stool coming out of the stoma is pure liquid, we could use medications and other techniques to try to thicken it, but it's pretty hard to control liquid stool. And so if we could thicken the stool through the stoma, then that might guide us into counseling a family whether closing a stoma or not is appropriate.